Hello, everybody. My name is Brian Keith Bowen, and welcome to Apologetics 101, the place where you will learn the facts the critics don't want you to know. Alright, we've been doing lately a Bart Ehrman series. We're going to be continuing that today with part 3 of the Bart Ehrman series, in which we're going to be dealing primarily with Bart Ehrman's, or some of Bart Ehrman's arguments on textual criticism. Alright, let's begin. Okay, originally I promised you this probably by the end of last weekend, but I got tired on doing textual critical analysis of two of the passages I mentioned in Bart Ehrman's book on misquoting Jesus. I did a textual critical analysis of Mark 1:41, and I did a textual critical analysis of Hebrews 2:9. I've done these before, but I went ahead and did it because I did it for my site. And went a little bit deeper as well for my site that I'm making. It isn't public yet because it's going to be several months before my site's completely done. I'm doing it by myself. I'm not having a team. I don't have lots of money finances behind me doing this, but I am doing a website for Apologetics 101, and I do have some blog posts, and I've got articles that's going to be out, and it's going to be cool. And I just got through doing a blog of a textual critical analysis of Hebrews, originally Mark 1:41. I did one early last weekend, and I did a textual critical analysis, which I just got through finishing today, of Hebrews 2:9. And so we'll discuss that a little bit. We're not going to go too much in detail of that one. I decided not to continue this series because I could probably say lots about Bart Ehrman's arguments. He deals with lots of different topic matters, and I have lots of disagreements with him, some pretty strong ones as well. But I realized that because Bart Ehrman deals with so many of these different topic matters, the chances are I'll probably end up dealing with these arguments topologically as I deal with other areas. Like right now, I'm doing alleged Bible contradiction. Bart Ehrman's name is probably going to come up quite often. So what I'm going to do this part 3 here, because this part 3 is going to be on his textual critical arguments. And I will hit a little bit on his arguments on Mark 1:41 and Hebrews 2:9. And I'm going to then go into, I guess the next part will be part 4 of the Bart Ehrman series, which I will deal with the top 10 fallacies that Bart Ehrman makes in his arguments. This way people can kind of know what to look for when they examine Bart Ehrman's arguments. And then I'll end the series there because this is not going to be an open-ended series. Of course, I will deal with his arguments throughout, the course of this channel. I'll deal with that. This Friday, I will do another alleged Bible contradiction video, and this one's going to be over the resurrection narratives. But I decided I want to go ahead and do this one, get part 3 over with. Then I'll dedicate myself to try to get the video for alleged Bible contradiction by this Friday or Saturday, and then once I do that, then I will go to do a part 4 of Bart Ehrman, of the Bart Ehrman series, which I probably will get done during the week or early in the week. But for right now, for today, that's what we're going to deal with. We're going to deal with some of his textual critical arguments. See, Bart Ehrman wrote a book called Misquoting Jesus. Alright? The impression he gives in the book is that he makes you think that everybody just blowing up in despair and not and we have no idea what the original text says. Now, of course, Bart Ehrman is a very inconsistent scholar. He's one of those scholars that could say in one book or in one debate that we don't know how what the original means. We can't even talk about the originals. We can't We can't know what the originals were, and then in the very next book and debate, he'll say what he thinks the originals could name, which isn't very consistent because but that's how he does it. That's how he does it. But the reality is that a lot of times Barham is not as skeptical as he tries to give the impression of. Sometimes he's less skeptical than you think. And the reality is, I actually saw a radio discussion which Bart Ehrman has, and he admits that we have a pretty good idea of what was in the original text. And I'm going to play that for you here in a little bit. But, yeah. So he's not quite as skeptical as he tries to come off. And Bart Ehrman actually agrees. In fact, in the paperback edition that I have right here, during there's like a question and answer section that the publishers included for this book, and he actually asked the question, or that question was asked of him about whether theological issues are suspect, and he says that, I mean, no matter what variant you can point to, there's always some variants other place throughout the misquoting Jesus, and which is probably likely true. That as far as going back to the original text, and he admits this in his book, or at least at the end in the Q&A, misquoting Jesus. And so nothing theological is messed up by these textual variants. I'll probably will do a separate series specifically on the manuscript evidence for the New Testament. I do want to do that eventually, but I want to get my alleged Bible contradiction series out of the way before I do that. Before I dedicate myself to that. This video probably won't be as long as the others. I'm trying to make these videos a little shorter than I normally do, if I can. And so this video is probably going to be about an hour long. Maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But anyway, let me read you a quote that Bart Ehrman says. Because see, Bart Ehrman thinks that every time that he treats these copies like they're back-to-back copies of one another. Like if this person is copying from the original, and this person copies from the original, this person copies the original, this person copies from the original, this one repeats the mistakes of this one repeats the mistakes of that one, and so forth. Because in these copies, there are mistakes. Now, he claims that, well, there's a mistake in every copy. Well, that's true. But it comes off kind of deceptive. Because if you actually look at the copies, a lot of them are true issues, or they might only have one or two mistakes in some of the manuscripts. They don't always have like tons of mistakes. See, what people are thinking is that the whole manuscript's got mistakes in it instead of just one or two errors or something like that. But even if a word is misspelled, it's considered a variant. So if a word was misspelled in a particular manuscript, then that would count as a variant. Oh, by the way, I do forgive my setup here. The window right here was too bright, so I put my green screen over it. Don't worry, no, it's not going to suddenly erase itself. You have to have a chroma key to do that on there, and I don't have I have a chroma key, but I don't have it processed with this video. But I can put a chroma key up. But in any case, I don't need one right now. I just put the green screen up there to block all that bright light. But it was kind of looking a little purplish, so I did adjust the hue in the screen. So if it looks a little odd, that's the reason why. I was just trying to prevent the brightness of it. I've got a light over here, so that way I can be lit it up. All right. As far as his argument like that, I mean, okay, yes, it comes kind of deceptive if you think about it. But or as far as what Bart Ehrman is arguing, it's misleading. What he's saying, it's not necessarily untrue. It's just misleading. It's the fact of the matter is that some of those variants that might like in a different era might be misspelled words or something. And in fact, that's the vast majority of the variances is different spellings of words. and of course different names have different spellings to them, but you can tell what name it was. For example, 1,000 manuscripts contain. John's name in Greek is Eonon. Um, Basically, there's like two news in the middle of his name, and uh, and if a scribe put one new instead of two. Now this is equivalent. If we had John's name in English, it would be equivalent of John's name with an N at the end, and if it had one N or two N's. That's basically what the English equivalent of a new is N from the Greek. And if you had that in 1,000 manuscripts, that would count as variant. I mean, you could still tell it's John. I mean, it's not like it's Mary or Philip or Paul or. I mean, nobody thinks that. It can still tell it's John. It's just a different spelling. Now, of course, there are lots of misspelled words as well, but you can still basically can tell what they are. About 70 to 80% of the variances are misspelled words, or in the case of movable new, which was a very common one. In fact, most of the variances, about 99.9% of them, can't even be translated out of Greek. So the reality is that most of the variants don't matter at all. In a video clip I'm going to be showing you in a little bit, and Bart Ehrman actually admits this. But the way in which he argues it, he doesn't give you that impression. He gives you the impression that we'll just throw up our hands in despair, and we don't have no idea what the original text said, which is not true. Not at all. But that's how he argues it. Now, I'm going to quote a quote from Bart Ehrman, and this comes straight out of his book, Misquoting Jesus, that I just held up in my hand. All right. He says, the problem is exacerbated by the fact that once a mistake was made, it could become firmly embedded in the textual tradition. More firmly embedded, in fact, than the original. This is not true. In fact, it's actually self-refuting, considering the fact that if the mistakes are there, the original reading is there as well. But we're going to get a little bit more into what Bart Ehrman is actually arguing, and I will deal with that. That is to say, once a scribe changes a text, whether accidentally or intentionally, then these changes are permanently in his manuscript unless, of course, another scribe comes along to correct the mistake. The next scribe who copies that manuscript copies those mistakes, thinking they are what the text said, and he adds mistakes of his own. The next scribe who then copies that manuscript copies the mistakes of both his predecessors and adds mistakes of his own, and so on. Mistakes multiply and get repeated. Sometimes they get corrected, and sometimes they get compounded. And so it goes for centuries. Bart D. Ehrman, Misquoting Jesus, 2005, page 57. Now, is that the case? He's treating these manuscripts like they're back-to-back processing copies. It's not like the original text just suddenly gets copied from once and then turns to dust. But that's a silly, illogical, unsound conclusion. Okay? The originals will most likely would have copied from hundreds of times. And the fact of the matter is, you don't know how many times it was copied. It could have been copied thousands. You don't know. But it is less likely to be only copied once, especially given the fact that our surviving copies that made it to like 8,200 or 80, or in the 3rd century or whatnot. These manuscripts, Tertullian had claimed that he had some of the originals even in his day. Even in his day, he had some of the originals. The papyrologists actually say that the New Testament or the papyrus can actually survive about 100 years, for about a century, without aid, without being in and unless of course something comes along and destroys it or hurts it or whatever, but it usually can. So assuming that nothing happened to the New Testament before then, the New Testament documents probably would have lasted that long and been copied from till either the ink was no longer legible, or until the manuscripts were wore out completely. So it would have been copied from lots of times. So it's not like a back-to-back copying process where one manuscript is copied from the original, and then the next manuscript over repeats that guy's mistakes, and then he makes mistakes of his own. This is what Bart Ehrman argues. And the next mistake, or the next manuscript comes in, and they make mistakes of his own, and so on, until you no longer have the original text. That's not how it went. The originals would have been copied from, and keep in mind, each one of the books of the New Testament also has its own textual history concerning how much it was copied, in areas it was copied. It spread out throughout Roman Empire, and you got other books spread out throughout the Roman Empire, and so they're being copied distinct from one another, and these copies are going all over the Roman Empire, and the originals themselves were being copied from hundreds of times. The first copies of the originals were being copied hundreds of times. The second copies of the originals were being copied from hundreds of times, and this would go on and on and on. So yes, there are mistakes in these copies. Yes, there's probably mistakes in every one of these copies. But when these mistakes aren't like what Bart is saying, because the mistakes would be in different places in the manuscript tradition. So what ends up happening is that we wind up with multiple lines of transmission, and we're able to use those multiple lines to get back at what most probably is the original. Now, is it absolute certainty? No. But it is reasonably certain. It is reasonably certain. It is probable. It's a probability argument. It is arguing a very high degree of probability that this particular reading goes back to the original text. Bart Ehrman goes further in his book, Misquoting Jesus. I didn't really put it in quotes on the screen or nothing. But Bart Ehrman also went further in there because he thought that there are variants that changes the meaning of entire books. Which, of course, the books are made of more than just one verse. It's made up of lots of verses, and a variant change would not change the meaning of the entire book. But that's what Bart has argued before. I just got through doing a textual critical analysis of Mark 141, where Jesus says to move with compassion. That's what almost all manuscripts have. There are a few that have. There are some that have moved with anger, but the earliest of this, actually, I think when I did the textual critical analysis, if I remember correctly, there was one Greek manuscript that contained the reading, and that was Codex Bezae. I have to look and see because it's been a little bit since since I did the textual critical analysis. So I have to look back at it and see what I had said. But when I did it, I remember there not being that much as far as to go on. And by the way, Codex Bezae is a very unreliable manuscript. It's a 5th century codex, and it's not considered very reliable. Almost all the manuscripts, almost all of them, would say that the reading was moved with compassion. And most Bible translations have that as well. And so I don't think that it's moved with indignant, moved with anger. I don't think that. I think I found like 3 translations that translated that way or mentioned that. And it's because there are some disputes over it as far as that goes. Maybe we'll cover that some other day, or you can read the article when I do my website. Because when I do my website, I plan on putting the post on probably maybe in every video that I have, just to try to make sure I promote this website. And it's a good website, and I got blogs, and I got articles. I'm going to have my YouTube videos on it. It's going to be cool when I get it up and running. But I did do a textual critical analysis of Mark 1:41 and of Hebrews 2:9. Hebrews 2:9 has only like 2 Greek manuscripts that contain it. The only thing that's probably the strongest argument that Bart makes on this, on Hebrews 2:9 being apart from God rather than by the grace of God. By the grace of God is karidi theou, and apart from God is kores theou. And Bart argues in his book Misquoting Jesus that he thinks it's kores theou, which is apart from God. I argue in my text critical analysis that the correct rendering is indeed by the grace of God, karidi theou. And I go over all the evidence for that because it's staggering. The manuscript evidence is beyond question. No one questions that. Now in Hebrews 2:9, the main argument is that the two manuscripts, that the 2 Greek manuscripts that do contain the reading, one of them just happens to be minuscule 1739. And this is very relevant. This is probably the strongest argument that Bart has in favor of this position, because minuscule 1739, it actually is probably either copied from a 2nd or 3rd century manuscript. It's got agreements. Lots of church fathers have cited it. And it's got agreements with Codex Vaticanus, I believe, as well as 3rd century manuscripts, going all the way back 2nd century actually, even P46. So you got P46B in 1739 that appears to be like an unbroken chain because it's almost completely in agreement with those manuscripts. So it is unquestionably copied from an earlier manuscript. Nobody doubts that. Not Bart, and Bart brings it up. And this is probably his strongest argument in favor of that position. The problem, however, is that would just prove that the variant is early enough. That the variant might have occurred. I think I gave maybe in the 3rd century. I think it's early 3rd century is when I think the variant probably actually occurred. It could have occurred in the 2nd century, I don't know. But the earliest citation I've seen so far is in the early 3rd century. But the evidence clearly showed in complete absolute, almost in complete absolute, that the reading is indeed by the grace of God. But even if it was apart from God, it would not damage anything theological. Of course not. I mean, what's that difference in Jesus saying, my God, why have you forsaken me? This is not anything that would oppose our theological views at all. And Ehrman doesn't claim that either. But any given case, I do want to show a clip from you because, see, Bart Ehrman often comes off like the impression he gives you is that we should throw our hands in despair and we have no idea what the original text says. Well, listen to what he actually says and admits to in this clip.
How would you contrast what you think the Bible's original message might be, the text of the New Testament, with what Christians commonly accept that message to be?
I don't think that's a matter of textual criticism, because I think textual criticism can get back pretty much to what the authors originally said. Yes, next.
Dr. Ehrman, as you know, there's probably great stylistic differences between your academic and popular writings. When you're on your Misquoting Jesus tour, I think based on the stuff I've heard from and listening especially to you on NPR and whatnot, the impression given was that due to textual variance, you couldn't really know anything that was written in the Bible. But in Forged, you kind of seem to know enough to do stylistic comparisons. And I actually have an MP3 on my iPod where you say to a conservative Lutheran show that we pretty much know what the biblical authors have said. If I use your own methodology towards the Bible against you, when I conclude there's a fake Bart Ehrman out there that contradicts himself?
No, it's the real Bart Ehrman who contradicts himself. I don't think I've ever said that we can't know that we have no idea what the biblical authors. Well, maybe the impression, but it's certainly nothing I've ever said, because it's not what I think. There are hundreds of thousands of differences in these manuscripts. That's a fact. There are more differences in our manuscripts than there are words in the New Testament. It's a fact. So it does create a problem. But most of these differences are completely immaterial. As I say in Misquoting Jesus, that most of the differences, most of these hundreds of thousands don't matter for anything. The majority of them simply show that scribes in antiquity could spell no better than my students can today. And scribes didn't have spell check. But scribes didn't have that, and so they misspelled tons of words. So I think these differences, that some of the differences are really significant. But I don't think that it means that we just throw up our hands and say we have no clue what the Gospel of Mark said. We do have a clue what Mark said. We have manuscript evidence for what Mark said.
That's from Bart Ehrman. But he gives you that impression, doesn't he? He makes you think that we have no idea what these guys wrote. We have no idea how to talk about the originals. Then he goes and says, yep, we can. Now, he says that he thinks this is a serious problem, but it's not as much of a problem as Bart makes it out to be, because we actually have tremendous amount of manuscripts and early dating manuscripts, and many of these manuscripts going all over the place in various locations in throughout the Roman Empire. And so we're able to get back to the original wording of the Word of God, the Bible. And so or the New Testament, this idea that we can't is that we should throw up our hands in despair. He admits that we shouldn't throw up our hands in despair. That we can know what the original text says. The thing with the stylistic differences is that sometimes stylistic differences were used as a piece of evidence that he would throw out there in his book Forged. I got his book Forged over there as well. And he would throw that out as a piece of evidence. But how do you think, and this is what Dan Wallace brought up in one of his debates with Barman, how do you think we know, actually I think he brought it up in both of the debates I've seen that he has with Barman, but how do you think we know what the styles were unless we know what the original text was? Because you can't make a stylistic argument and say this, because how do you know the styles didn't change as the variances of changing the style of various copyists? The reason we know what the style, whether First and Second Peter are the same style, or whether the four Gospels are the same style, or whether Acts is the same style as Luke. We know that Luke and Acts are the two parts of the same work, two parts of the same work. The same writer is writing it, regardless of what you think of who wrote it, and that sort of thing. And how do you think we know that if we can't get back to the original text? So the guy brought up a very good point, very interesting one. Now, of course, you heard what Bart says. He ultimately says, okay, well, I think it's a problem, but it doesn't keep us from getting to the original. But he does actually think that that we can, or at least he says in his debates and his popular level works and that sort of thing. But the reality is that he knows that we can actually get back to the original text of the New Testament. Beyond question. All right. Textual scholars have determined that they can reconstruct the original text of the New Testament with over 99.9% accurate. Some people say 99.5. Point is, it's a high degree of probability of reconstructing the original text. Now, is it absolutely certain? No. Is there disputes about certain verses? Yes. But for the most part, we can pretty much get back to the original. We can pretty much get back to the original. And I guess for skeptics, this is a serious issue because we got more manuscripts of the New Testament than we have of any other ancient work. We've got more early dated manuscripts of the New Testament than we have of any other ancient work. Bart Ehrman knows this. We got more widely attested evidence. The New Testament is the most widely attested of any other work of antiquity, meaning it's spread out more further with more plentiful manuscript copies, as well as other ancient versions that have been written of it. We have about 5,800 Greek manuscripts, over 10,000 Old Latin manuscripts. We got a number in Syriac, Gothic, Coptic, Georgian, Armenian, etc. And all of these manuscripts together number to over 24,000 copies. And we got early papyrus manuscripts going all the way back into the 2nd century, deep in it. We got entire collections that date to 2nd century. We got a whole books that date to AD 200 or after. We got some important early unsealed texts that date early, like Codex Sinaiticus and Codex Vaticanus. Codex Vaticanus was likely copied from a 2nd century manuscript. P75 and Vaticanus are our most important manuscripts on John. When these two agree, it's almost certain that it goes back to the original text of John. Especially if these two agree, along with P66, which contains most of John and most of Luke. When P66 on John, when P66, P75, and Vaticanus agree, there's never been a time where I've ever said that doesn't represent the original text of John. There's never been a time that I've ever said that would not. The evidence that we have of manuscript tradition is incredible. Okay, and it blows anything away that we have from ancient history. The average work from ancient history is about roughly 20 manuscripts. It's not even uncommon entirely for us to have have only one manuscript copy of a particular work. Like, look at Gospel of Thomas. We have one manuscript written in Coptic and a few Greek fragments of it. That's all we have. Nothing else. The New Testament, by far, has far more manuscripts than any other work of ancient history, and far earlier dated manuscripts than any other ancient history. It is spread out further in the Roman Empire, more widespread than more widely attested than any other work of antiquity. It's like Dan Wallace says lots of times, and he's even said this in the debate with Bart Ehrman. If you apply your skepticism to every work of ancient history, whatever skepticism you apply to the New Testament, you have to apply to every other ancient work that we have in ancient history. Every single work, about 1,000 times over, he said. And Bart Ehrman said in his debate with James White, he said, yep, that's right. You have to apply to skepticism. Except he cited Suetonius, and he cited Tacitus, and he does it uncritically. I think I mentioned that in the last Bart Ehrman series. But either way, he does it without ever referencing it in his books that he doesn't think you can get back to the original Tacitus or original Suetonius. But he doesn't. But anyway, I wanted to cover some of his arguments on textual criticism. I thought it might be relevant to a series specifically on Bart Ehrman. I'm going to do one more part, but only to cover the fallacies and errors he typically makes, just kind of give you a general idea to what to look for, because he makes these a lot in his arguments, and I'm going to do that next time when I do the next Bart Ehrman series and next video on this series, and that will be the last video I have on the series. Alright. Well, I'm sorry I couldn't make it longer. But I am going to be doing, like I said, I've been working all last weekend on those two blogs that I have for my website I'm making. And this coming Friday, we're going to be doing another video of alleged Bible contradictions where I'm going to deal with the resurrection narratives. All right, that's all for now. And remember, keep yourself in the know. Always remember to learn the facts the critics don't want you to know. Thank you.